session, our discussion with our speakers. Yeah, in here we have both Mohanad Yaqubi and Mas Rifki Muna. We both are going to talk about actually the topic that given to us is archiving and resistance. But I think since on the day when we played the first movie in the opening last Saturday, apparently there was things that we read on the news, the sad news, the organized attack, Hamas, and all the updates, recent update that we read on the newspaper until today. Yeah, so I think it's so relevant to what we are going to discuss, not only about the archiving as a technical, but maybe it will also be part of, as I discussed with Mas Rifki earlier, as part of ideological movement, and the end, it's also part of the resistant propaganda, and also like the many objectives that in the end can be achieved through archiving. Okay, and we watched your movie on Saturday, and there are also 3 other movies that play during this Madani 2023 festival, which I think it gives lot of insight, lots of information to us. I mean, we know about you and your movie, but when we actually play it in here and have lots of discussion, I think since Palestine, Hamas, Israel, and all those issues that we read on the paper today, I think it's very relevant, and we can discuss it here, accompanied by Mas Rifki. Yeah? Maybe as you already know, let me introduce Mohanad Yaqubi. Okay, currently he lives in Belgium, yeah, because he is currently a resident researcher, and the family, your family, including your mom, is still in Gaza. Yeah, Yaqubi, Pak Yaqubi. Yeah, we are here calling Mr. by Pak, yeah, Bapak. Yeah. Part of the Palestine Film Institute, creating lots of movie as a filmmaker, documentary, and also lots of archive that you are able to collect, which I think it gives it raises lots of questions, starting maybe from how you are able to connect with the Japanese, and maybe later, yeah, Mas Rifki can also help us to discuss about how it impacts the current situation and the political situation and everything related to it. Mas Rifki Muna, both of his master and PhD is in defense studies, yeah, in Australia, and his PhD is from UK. So currently he teach as a member of academic, not member ya, chair bahkan ya, di University Islam International Indonesia. So both of our speaker can give us insight to discuss about this archiving and resistance. Okay, so maybe I will start with Yaqubi first about the process. So I will divide this discussion into 2 groups. I mean, group of questions. Maybe number 1 about the technical, the way you create the movies, the archiving, and later we will also touch the non-technical things, maybe about how film can also be part of the propaganda and everything. Yeah, maybe you can start with how you first start creating this AK21 and how you are able to connect with the Japanese in the beginning.
Thanks a lot and welcome everyone. I don't think it's when they come and ask me, you make archive films.
Yes.
I say I don't make archive films.
Yes.
I mean,
you collect
these are just outputs or traces that comes out of the research.
Okay.
And with R21, it was really. I mean, I've already did a film before, which is also was screened here on Sunday, Off Frame, AKA Revolution Until Victory, which was a result or one of the outputs of a research that took some 7 years on the history and of the film produced around the Palestinian Revolution. So the Palestinian Revolution officially is between 1968 and 1982. And in this 14 years, there was more than, like, I would say 400, 500 films that were produced, made by Palestinian filmmakers, by Arab filmmakers, and by international filmmakers in solidarity with the Palestinian struggle. So these films were made by different parties, political parties, but also by film students. They were made by famous filmmakers like Jean-Luc Godard, like Masao Adachi, like Santiago Alvarez. These are like big names in cinema. Yeah. So it has these spectrum that it didn't only talk about the practice of militant cinema on the Palestine, but it's actually a window into the practice of struggle cinema in the world. Because it just because it was so diverse that it can't create that. So that is my research, and I made the film. When I went to Japan to screen that film, Off Frame, after the screening, one of the audience, Dr. Aoi Tanami, she came to me and she gave me a list of films in Japanese. And I was like, okay, I have just finished 7 years of research, but I still find a new 20 films that I don't know about that is made in Japan. And that's actually how, so it was a continuation of the same research that, okay, now we are doing this connection between Palestine and Japan. And I felt it was very interesting, but also a lot of information, new information came about. And for me, it was, if I can show to the world, like, there is even a relationship between Japan and Palestine. What is the relationship between you and me here? It's a kind of an extreme example of transnational solidarity that makes everybody questions the idea of archiving itself. So that's why I continued working on. The idea also was, we have these 20 reels, 20 films that we found in Japan. We took them to Ghent, to my studio there, where I have a scanner. We digitized the 20 films. And at the beginning, I was not thinking making a film, because I just finished a film, so on the same topic. But I decided we were doing this exhibition in Documenta, with the Documenta 15, curated by Ruan Grupa. And I thought, like, okay, maybe part of the exhibition that I will make a trailer for every film out of the 20 films. So 20 trailers, put them on a screen with the catalogs, with like the research material that will be the exhibition. I called my editor and like, okay, let's do these 20 trailers. We did the 20 trailers. And then he asked me, so how do you want to screen them? You want to put 20 screens? I told, man, that's a bit like uneconomical. Let's put them all in one timeline, and we can screen the 20 together. He opened the timeline and he started to put the trailers. He asked me, what order do you want the trailers? Do you want it alphabetic? Do you want it chronological? I told him, okay, let's do it according to the year of production. So the film produced 63, 67, 80, 72, like, so we organized them like that. And we didn't see anything. I just put them on the timeline, and he made play. And we start watching the first film, okay, first trailer, second trailer, third trailer, and suddenly, by we got to the sixth trailer, we realized that we are watching a film. We are watching something that is connecting these 20 films together, which is the Japanese solidarity movement that selected these 20 films. And we start to understand the reasons and the motives of selecting these films. And so what we did in R21, we basically amplified the Japanese sound. At the beginning, we were like, trying to hide the Japanese. And then now we tried, we need to, this is the thing that will make us understand why these 20 films are in Japan. So it's really a process of observation rather than a process of filmmaking. We observed what is the material, the archive. Again, when we talk about archive, there is a materiality, that this materiality produces narratives because they have traces, there are hand notes, there are a lot of things that tells us things more than what the film itself tells us.
You once mentioned or state that the Tokyo Reel considered as imperfect archives. Yeah. What make you say that? Is it not complete as a archive, or do you take the point of view, or what?
No, no. The imperfect archives, as just maybe I can little bit of explain a bit this concept. It also comes from the 60s, from an article by a writer, Julio Espinosa. Okay. He's a Cuban filmmaker, theorist, with Santiago Alvarez. They actually built the IKIAC, the Cuban Cinema Institute. And he wrote a 5 pages essay. It's called Toward Imperfect Cinema. And he tried to explain what is imperfect cinema, which is, there are different, they say third cinema, third world cinema, struggle cinema, militant cinema. There are different titles, but I felt that imperfect cinema is the best title. And he explained it in a way that it's the film that is seeking imperfection, as opposing to cinema, Hollywood or author cinema, that is trying, the dream of every Western or educated filmmaker is to have a film that when you project it, you forget about the reality and you only think about the reality of the film, which is like the perfect cinema somehow. The perfect cinema is about deceiving. It's about make you think that you are living in a different reality. The imperfect cinema is actually the cinema that reminds you with the reality. You have an elements that come, like in perfect cinema, you will see the cameraman or like the sound man is inside the frame suddenly, which is a reminder that that this is a film, and this is that it's made by someone, and this someone has an ideology and has thought to transmit to you. And also imperfect cinema is something that is able to add to. So we can add, it's because it's the narrative of the people. People always change, and they have the right to eliminate and add narratives and stories. So if their story is, what is a perfect narrative is the narrative of the that doesn't exist. Like the Pharaonic, for example, have a perfect narrative because they can't speak. We only can predict what they have from their archaeology. So archaeology produces perfect narratives. But living people produces imperfect narratives and imperfect cinema. So what I thought about is like how such imperfect cinema, the only way that we can preserve imperfect cinema is to make imperfect archives. Because these films exist in many of the perfect archives, which is the institution's archive, but we don't access them. They are not alive. They are there dead because they are not close to the people. The imperfect archives are the archives that exist in houses, in lofts, in basements, and it's part of the people's material. And that's what happens with most of the research of Tokyo Reels and the film before, Off-Frame, that you knock on the door of someone and he opens to you and gives you 2 reels that, I found this in my cellar. And you open it and then you start to speculate. So where did this film come from? And is it connected to this filmmaker? And it's part of that story. And so this possibility of creating histories, it's possible from imperfect archive. If that makes sense, I don't know.
Okay. I ask you one more question before moving to Mas Rifki. You mentioned 15 years ago in Documenta that covering both sides when creating movie in Palestine is a luxury for a filmmaker, right? So how can you connect it with current situation and the thing that you've experienced for the past few decades, how you as a documentary maker and filmmaker, when you said that it's a luxury to have both sides. So you have to take sides when creating a movie in Palestine, especially during this condition.
Yeah, I think imperfect cinema and struggle cinema, and the cinema I like that is built on obstacles. So it's about finding solutions for obstacles.
Okay.
So if you like don't have the good sound, or you don't have a sound device, how can I make a film without sound? Or how can I make a film that depends on the sound and the editing? These obstacles create aesthetics, create cinematic aesthetics. And the obstacles has poetics that we can't ignore while we are making a film. And this is one of the things I love in cinema, this ability to observe. I mean, cinema is just a reflection of reality, yeah? But it's the, as Godard say, it's the same time as the reality of that reflection. And it doesn't lie. So if you are trying to hide a problem, it will show. It will show either in the narrative or, so why to hide it? Make the problem the center of the narrative and work on it. And that's where, because I learned cinema in Palestine with my friends, with cinephiles, and I also learned cinema in London at Goldsmith. And when I see both ways of making films, I prefer the one in Palestine, because like in London, you can't move, or like the way they educate you that you have a crew, you have lights, and your job is just to sit there and say action. Or like, but it's not that. It's
you can apply the technical things, the best practices in creating movies. Yeah,
yes.
But
and I come from a collective perspective, because when we used to make films in Palestine, we are all together. Like the cameraman is the sound man, and we love what we do together, and we want to see it together. It's not about hierarchy, it's not about positions. While in the way that cinema is educated in Western, in European or Western academia, it's more of positions and hierarchies, and you can't bypass. So like the light man can't come to the director, tell him, maybe if you do the shot from here is better. It's forbidden.
Yeah.
And you are educated not to bypass your limits. While here, for example, I saw that in different collectives in Indonesia, from the south, from Palestine, that no, if you don't do that, you're mistaken. Because it means that the film might be better and you're not taking the chance of doing it better.
Okay. Yeah. I will go back to that, ke Mas Rizky sekarang. Based on the answer from Yaqubi about archiving and how, for example, Japan, Tokyo Reel involved in this archiving about conflict in Palestine. Maybe my first question will be, what is actually the connection? How Japan is concerned with issues in Palestine, and at the end they are able to provide those archives?
Well, thank you. But before that, I would like to thanking to the organizer to invite me. You know, it is such a great honor for me to involve in this forum.
To have such
panel
with you.
Our guru, you know, I'm following his explanation. I feel that I'm properly sitting in the class and listening to very good lectures, you know. And thank you for that.
Sorry if I sound like lecturing.
Well, no.
It's actually
it is a
way.
matter of your expertise, and you know exactly the things that you are talking, you know. And since we are talking about archiving, it was said partly by Pinoza about the incomplete
archive,
cinema or incomplete archive before I enter into the Japan thing.
Yes.
But deeper than that is actually archiving is something which is original. Archive give us
and originalities of the substance or narratives that we really would like to have it. So that is so. While we are talking about the imperfect cinema, but it is
powerful,
actually the originality of the documentation that we needed. The point is that that kind of archive which is being taken by, in some cases, might be incidentally being taken, So when the war broke out, so someone, they don't really waiting until someone is launching the rocket, for example, or what is happening now in Gaza, when Israel, while attacking the populations, someone is not waiting until the Israeli respond to what Hamas did, But that documentation helped us to preserve what generally being called as the narrative. And this is how the Palestinian narrative being presented through that archive, and it is also will be very helpful in what I say, countering Israeli historical narratives, because Palestine have history, and Israeli also have what I might say an engineered history, So that kind of documentation will be very helpful to be being used to use it previously with the word of propaganda. Not propaganda, but to conscientize people about certain occasion, certain case, So this is matter of conscientization on that narrative. And the other one is, I think, it is about, it has meaning for what generally being called as institutional memory. So archive have strong relations to building of institutional memory, whether it is at individual level, societal level, or larger communal, larger society. Because if people only rely on their personal memory capability, it is easy to get lost. But when there is movie, there is documentation, there is an archive that could be collected and being screened, it will help to rebuild what is generally being called as an institutional memory. And for the area which is struggling, I think Palestine is one of nations which still struggling for their rights, to get their sovereignty and proper status as nation state. Of course, it's not only Palestine, but Palestine is currently we suffer from the occupations of Israel for many years. And I think that kind of archive will be so important. And my last point regarding Japan, I think as far as I read that Japan has been, I call it relatively good relation with the Palestine, especially during the era of the leadership of Palestine under Yasser Arafat during the PLO times, And Yasser Arafat has visited Japan for, I think, more than 3 times actually. And leaders in Japan also several high-level officials from Japan also visiting Palestine. So basically there is kind of connections between Japan and Palestine, and Japan also committed to support the development and also humanitarian development for Palestine, especially if we check to the program that is, we can check it from the ODA program, So there is a connections between solidarity between Japan and Palestine, even though still at the minimum level, But it is very substantive to move forward, even though the situation in Palestine move into different directions, as we can see for the moment. Yeah.
I think it's interesting when you mention narration, yeah, propaganda and narrative, and how the archive, seeing from war journalists, yeah, or independent, or everyone, citizen journalists, yeah, that they just film whatever happened around them that gives us the information what happened in Palestine. So, do you think that documentary movie archiving it also helps you, Palestine, sharing the narration that probably against or the opposite of narration that given by Israel?
Yeah, I mean, this is in the core of survival and building the collective consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to understand really Palestine, we have to always go back, or the question, the origin of the Palestinian question, we always have to go back to the 48, the 1948, where the state of Israel was established, and suddenly the people who were in Palestine and they had the Palestine state disappeared. They disappeared suddenly, like, even if you're born and you have a birth certificate that says Palestine, if you go to Canada, they will not recognize it. They will say, and that happened in one day.
Mm-hmm.
So you wake up, suddenly your country, your place, you're invisible. It's not that it's destroyed. They didn't destroy everything. But what they did, they made everything invisible.
Mm.
And how did they make that? They captured the archive.
Mm.
All of the archives of like the looting, the booting, which happened in 48, it's incredible. Like army goes into houses, picking up libraries, picking up pictures, picking up everything and putting it into storages, knowing that this is the most dangerous secret for the Israeli state. That the memory of these people is their secret weapon.
Okay.
And that's what that's when making, they took our archives and they made us invisible.
Mm-hmm.
So the Palestinian cinema of the 60s, 70s made us visible again. Because for somebody who is invisible, camera will become their weapon, no? Like, I mean, if you suffer from fear, you will, or hunger, you will go eat. If you're hot, you go take a shower. If you're invisible, you will hold the camera. And that's what they did, the Palestinian in the 60s and the 70s. They hold the camera. Before that, they didn't feel the need because, when you exist in a farm, why do you need to take a self-representation? But suddenly they are invisible and they hold the camera. Now, again, it's the archive. It's the image and the memory that works together to represent or build up the consciousness of the people. I mean, I don't want to quote Mao here, but when like you have to make people believe that they are people to become people, that's what the archive does. And the ability to produce archive, which means that, they stole our archive, they took our archive, and this is a documented cases throughout the last 30, 50, 60 years. What do? Do we sit down and we call on the international community to bring back our memory? Please bring us our memory. Or do we work on building up the memory, recollecting it, building up again, like it's, and this is also very common thing in the Palestinian family life, that when Palestinian families loses libraries. So you have a library in your town in Palestine, you lost the house, you lost the library, you go to another country in Lebanon, there is another war, you lose the library, you go to Tunis, you build another library. And so this act of building libraries or building archives is a sign of vitality, of a sign of being alive. And this is resistance. Resistance is by remembering and making sure that the memory moves from one generation to another. And that's why I call it imperfect, because it's not the memory that was at the same moment. It's not like a frozen memory in an archive building that nobody visits.
Actually, it's giving like second life to the.
And it's always under questioning and adding new stories to it and new images. And you know, the picture that you and your partner, your wife, and the next picture is your partner, your wife, and 2 kids. The third picture is you and your grandson.
Yeah.
The 4th picture, you're not in the picture, but you know, that act of building up images, it's the resistance. And that's what I believe it's important that I tried in R21 to give an example, a methodology. It's not about, it's about the solidarity between Palestine and Japan. It's about a lot of the Palestinian cinema. It's about many things. But it's a methodology of how to create collections. What does it mean? Okay, we are a group of people. We want to make an archive that makes you a storyteller, that makes you also someone who writes history. And this also shifts the power centers from the state, the power, the regime that tells narratives. In our case is the Zionist who tells our narrative to us, that we are the one who are telling our narratives. We have our archives, and wherever you're gonna attack us, destroy our archives, we are building up again, because we are lively people. We are alive. And the minute, I mean, that's why I always say in Europe, there is something dead, because there is only archives. They're not producing new archives.
Yeah.
You always go to the archives that are already made, and you don't see that there is a new collection that is added to the archive. Colonial archive, it's colonial archive. It's not gonna, it's stopped and it's there on their chest,
Category.
as they say.
Yeah.
And they have to deal with it. But they're not dealing with it. Dealing with it means that they add new collections, new archives, treat this material, and so yeah, simply as that. I don't know if,
maybe you have comment. Is that maybe you can also share experience from other countries that also use archiving as a way of resistance?
Yeah, archiving, of course, the first is it's a matter of it could help to conscientize, and it is also connecting the dots, you know, connecting the dots of the other aspects that might be lost, you know. So by presenting the archive, there will be more understanding on how not only the chronologies, but how the systemic connections on certain situations happen from time to time. And yes, archive is so important. I remember that once upon a time, I went to Budapest. I visited a library that they store the archives for war and genocide in Bosnia. So the whole of documents that being used for the Hague legal process for trial for the Milosevic and so on, the archive is being collected and stored in Budapest. At that time was stored by the library of the CEU, for example, Central European University. So basically this is how archive in that situation is very, very precious, you know, and by preserving it and possibly to make it into kind of screen, you know, movie and so on, or to release that documentation will be so crucial, you know. And I think in the case of Palestine, it's very important because the occupation that even start before before 1948, you know, we can go to 1917, even when the Balfour Declaration being chartered, you know, everything's all of the colonial behavior in that area. If there is an archive that come from the people, well, of course, some of them come from the official document. If they already being, being released. But generally, some document in the U.S., for example, after 20 years, some of document will be released to the public. But that kind of archive will help in constructing helping at least to put and push for consciousness and also provide networks of understanding.
Yeah, and in Palestine, currently when you try to access archive, documentation and everything, how so? Is it currently available? I mean, I know during that condition, but you yourself work in the Film Institute, working with fellow cineasts. What are the challenges of collecting, archiving all those documentary?
It's funny, we were talking about this, me and Rifki before, that the institution that should have the archive actually is the institution that is producing the forgetness. So the PLO itself, that it should be the place where the archive and the memory is, because they signed this peace agreement, and in order to access international acceptance, they had to forget about the time of struggle. So it's kind of impossible. So when they came back to Palestine, let's say the PLO came back to Palestine, only bodies, without memories. So you come here as a peaceful entity, without any of the package of the films, your guns, your books, your all of your revolutionary ideas. You leave it behind so you can come. In Palestine, the archive starts in '94. The archive, it's the archive of the institution of the PLO, which is the PA, the Palestinian Authority, which was established according to the agreement of Oslo between the Israelis and Palestinians, signed in Washington in '94. So yeah, that's the only archive you can find, which is TV programs, films, birth, paper documentation starts from '94. Everything before that,
you cannot.
It's not. I mean, you have to make a research. So, in my case, I had to travel like maybe 20 countries to get a film from here, film from there, make an interview, because also building an archive is not only material, but there is memory. So we had to do a lot of interviews with people who were part of that period. But again, I can't say this is Palestinians people, this is my archive, because I see it subjectively. I interviewed this person, but I didn't interview that person. I like this person more.
Based on your
there
own.
Is and that's what the Rida says. It says like there is a psychic for the archivist himself that affects the content of the archive. So, but this is the thing. This happens all the time. But institutions pretend that it's an absolute archive, which is not true.
Yeah. And you think and you consider, based on the archive that being played in many countries, it is able to give different perspective, different narration, and in the end, it is successfully able to, giving the contra narration and propaganda to the narration that given by the Western, for example. Do you think?
I mean, that's one of the dilemmas we had with the R21, with the Tokyo Reels archive. We were thinking, is this Palestinian archive or Japanese archive? And somehow the agreement, the understanding was this is Japanese archive until Palestine is free. Because also, even if Palestine is free, this is having archive in a certain context. It grows in the context, and it becomes an evidence of a practicing of archiving, and who's behind the archiving is also a combination of thoughts. So, who archived the Tokyo Reels are Japanese, and the collection is actually an evidence, an indicator of Japanese solidarity movement practices and their politics. And this is part of the Japanese conscious. Like, it's hard in Japan to trace the left movement archive, for example. It's hard in Japan to follow the institutional archive, the left, not the Solidarity archive. And it's not only the transnational solidarity, but like anti-gentrification movement, grassroots movement, environmental struggles, also refugee struggles in Japan. All of this imperfect archives, and somehow it's hard to access. The state is not interested in this. The state is interested in the grand narratives. They are interested in the films that goes to Cannes, the films that they goes to, you know, shows the and has a commercial life. But the films that are or archives that are more reflective, that they don't have, they're more cultural than they don't find place. So I think it affects, and everywhere in the world, and this is why I say it's a methodology, because everywhere in the world you will find that. Even I'm sure if I dig in Indonesia here, I will find Palestinian films that maybe was screened by Solidarity movement or by Student Union or by and again the question will be, is this Indonesian archive or Palestinian archive? Maybe I'll just end with a little small, it's a nice quote from Serge Lapiron. He's a French writer and filmmaker. He's describing the Palestinian cinema and memory after 1982. 1982, it's when the Israeli army invaded Beirut, and they liquidated and kicked out the PLO out of theirs, and they had to go and leave all of their archives. And he says 82 and the invasion, it's like for the memory, the Palestinian memory was an explosion. And fragments of this memory landed everywhere in the world in forms of images, sounds, films, text. So you will find Palestinian archives in every archive around the world. In universities, in Chile, in Argentina, in Australia. I mean, it's unbelievable how this...
The power of archives, you can find basically everywhere, but you have to do lots of effort in order to find that.
But that's the struggle is not easy. The struggle is the effort. It's to rebuild these frames. And you know, when something is broken, you can't put it back to what it is. You can put something looks like it, functional the same way, but it's not the same cup. And that is the resistance, and somehow that's...
I just would like to make this the comments, this last one. That's 1982 is very, how do I say, that's the time that really changed everything. Because when Israel entered into Lebanon and they basically destroyed the whole of two camps in Shabra and Satila, you know, with the leader of Ariel Sharon from the Israel, they killed a lot of Palestinians. And it's then also liquidating PLO. And that changed the history of Palestine because of the central leaders of Palestine that relatively being accepted by many component or many countries is disappear, and the power of Palestine is also disappear. So in that situation, the archive becoming so important, but those kind of archive is also have to deal in how, well, navigating this problem of archive, basically navigating of bias and subjectivities. Because when we are talk about archive, just an example, I was with my friend involved in collecting archive for reformasi of Indonesia, you know, transition for democracy, for student movement. Of course, when we make a collection of that archive or collecting the archive, we have an ideology, you know. The ideology is how to promote more democratic Indonesia. And for Palestinian side, it's basically the ideology and also the purpose is how to bring
the status of Palestine into an independent state. You know, so basically, when we have to deal with that, of course, it is not always easy. You know, and we need a lot of different perspective. And I think with regard to 1982 case, because the situation that was happened in Lebanon with the entry of Israeli force was terribly, very destructive, you know, and it will go to spread across the globe and enter into the memory of everyone, you know, and it's easy, it is easy to get information about that situation, you know. So I myself write my my bachelor scripts at that time on Lebanese civil war, you know. So I'm very
international relation, in international relation.
very well, very close to that situation, and I think that's one of the aspect that I need to see, and it is also we have to navigate on how to avoid something like bias in other side, but when we produce or making the archive, of course we have value that they would like to aspire for, you know. So meaning that, of course, challenging in one side, but the goal that we have, or ideology that we have, of course, it will have to serve for the process for advancing the society or for the peace process and for the general society in the Palestine, something like.
When you mention about ideological motivation, when you do or collecting archive, you take side. You have like the purpose, for example, for democracy process and everything. And you in Palestine, you also have your own political motivation. You also mentioned about its bias.
Take side is not always a bad thing. Because when we talk about human values, about democracies, about progress, about human rights, protections, women, children, and so on, you know, it is part of our ideology, you know. So I think, and that line, there are an understanding on how certain archive, or in this one, in the case of Palestine, will have to value in that ideology in terms of value of ideology for human progress, dignity, freedom, and that kind of things. Thank you.
So you also agree for what Rifka mentioned about it should take side. It should take side to humanity. That's what you actually do with the archiving.
Of course,
right?
I mean that's our struggle is for the human, and the human needs a space to practice its humanity. You know, I mean, where are we gonna be practicing? And that's why the first thing we are fighting and struggling for is independence. The independence of being able to travel when you want. It's very simple things we are asking for. Travel when you want, to be able to be safe with your kids and parents. And so if we don't stand by these values, we lose. And it's important to stand, I mean, on one side, because you can't be in two sides all the time. It's not even on two sides. It's we only can be on one side if we are humans, and we start from there. But when you come and you treat us as subhumans, like as a colonial object, let's say, that's when the problem is, and that is the core of the problem of Israel. We don't mind. I don't think there is a Palestinian who minds living with Jews, because Palestine is the historic land. We are very used to have living Muslim, Christian, Jews. It's part of the fabric of the society. But the problem is when someone fabric that is, and I don't know, it's not even the fabric, because Palestinian Jews suffered deportation the same like the Christian and the Muslim Palestinians. It's the problem when you have somebody who comes in with their machines, extracting your culture, your memory, your resources, and without even asking you, forcing this, hiding, using mythical relationships. What is the relationship to a land? It's to work on it and to be in contact with it, not to come and say like, oh, after 2,000 years that I have a connection with this land. Okay, I mean, yeah, come and live, let's talk, but they come as colonials. That's our problem. We don't have problem with the people. That's very important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so before I move on to next question, maybe there is question from the audience? One or two question? Please? Okay. We'll take question from the audience.
Yeah. Hello, Mohanad, Mas Rifki, Bandari. I'm Sofia. But before I ask questions, I wanted to express my sadness and my heartbroken because of what is happening in Palestine. And I also just watched news this morning that they attacked with phosphor. Also, that's a forbidden weapon. And I hope your family and parents are okay over there, Mohanad. Well, it's. I mean, to be honest, I'm not really into archiving. Like, I'm not really into it. But I think 2 days ago, I met an Irish guy, like he's Western, and he told me that he watched the opening film R21, and it's interesting because then he told me that hey, the film is what he heard or what he knows about what happens in Palestine is different than what he watched. So I'm pretty happy that I believe that he actually got a new reference about what is happening. And some of my friends who live in Europe, they were calling me like, did you hear what is happening? And they were telling me that Western media, they are blaming Hamas for that without telling the reasons why Hamas did that, for example. So I have some questions actually, but maybe we can talk also later. But how did you start to do your research? I mean, I don't know like how many libraries in Palestine or I think in Indonesia we don't have like a really strong archiving, right? This is not really our habit also. But how did you start that? And how many times have you screened R21? And I just wanted to know how people reaction, especially in Europe or Western world. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
So I really, I've been working with a collective, with Idioms Film and producing films. So I was making films, but not in a film school. When I went to London to study, one of the lecture was about third cinema. And the teacher there, she spoke about Mustafa Abu Ali, who is an old filmmaker from that period. And she asked me, do you know him? I said, yes, but I don't know anything else. And she talks about this world of third cinema and the relationship between Mustafa Abu Ali and Jean-Luc Godard and meeting in Oran Film Festival with Santiago Alvarez. And I came out of that lecture, that's like in 2007. I came out of that lecture happy and proud that we are part of, that there is a history, but at the same time I was troubled that why I don't know, I was already 26, 27, why don't I know about this history? So that's where I felt that it was a personal quest to connect to film history and to its archive. And it became now R21, or this whole research, Subversive Film. R21 has been screening a lot. I mean, it's very also interesting. In the US, there is a lot of screening, US, North America, but it's also related to the position of the US. So they are interested in Japan and seeing how Japan is looking at them. And they found this interesting because the whole Japanese struggle and solidarity comes as well from anti-imperial sentiments. and anti-colonial, and anti-American sentiments as well, because that's where the new Japanese left was born in opposition of the defense treaty to the U.S. So a lot of the Americans were interested. They're not looking at it the same way. European, it's weird because they always say it's not balanced. It's like we see your film, but we don't hear the other side story. It's like, I always say, it's not my problem to listen to the other side. Go see other films. I mean, even for the chance to make a film that speaks to my voice, I still have to have the other voice. Why? Why do you ask that for an Indonesian film, or like, not let's say not Indonesian, but like, I don't know, any people in struggle like you ask to hear like an Egyptian revolutionary? Do you ask them where is the other voice, the state voice? I mean, why? You don't do that. But that's as I said just before, like it's related to how the Western consciousness is constructed after Second World War. That's what I also say, like, we people in the South and the East, we are beyond the politics of the Second World War. In the West, they are still there. They still see the world according to the Allies and their perspective from their own atrocity. I mean, it's not our own atrocity, what happened there. But they want to impose on everyone this perspective and use it as a way to to structure the relationships. So it's not correct. It's leading to fascism. We can see that in many places in Europe, that they're getting to more right-wing, not only in politics, but also in our cultural scene. And there is a lot of cancellation, of cultural cancellation that doesn't make any sense. Now in Berlin, if you wear a hatta, you get arrested. Today, that happened yesterday and today. Any Palestinian artist or any artist who signed BDS, the boycott statement, they're not allowed to exhibit in Europe. They are systematically, as if even the Israelis managed to recognize the Palestinians. Europe is not able to recognize, because it means that recognizing the Palestinian will make them see their mistake of supporting a colonial project in the region like this.
Okay. Any comment?
Yeah. Well, the question wasn't for me, but I just would like to say that, well, this is our challenge basically when we read, we watch the existing information/media. In the case of Palestine, or also in some other cases, we have to be careful when we are reading the media. So our critical mind have to be put in place, because putting the case into context is very important. Just for example, the case what's happening with the attack of Hamas into Israel. 90% of the media, if you pay attention, most of them only talking about Hamas attack. You know, no single news. You know, well, of course there are that explaining why that happened. You know, so that kind of principle, putting things at the context, is so important, especially because of the, well, in reality, there is global media hegemony, you know, and that's who control everyday life of our, well, every day of our life, digitally, you know, and algorithmically, you know, because our media algorithm is actually dictated by AI-based system that looking at how global architectures of information is flowing to. And in some other situation, there is still the existing of what I generally call it information operation, which is being pushed for everyone
to accept that narratives, that the narrative is actually designed by those who are, if we are talking about Palestine, who basically colonizing Palestine. So we need to be always carefully about that, and we need to put the fact into its context, the larger context, the larger realities. And to put the realities into the larger realities, we need also to broaden our worldview and keep learning. I think that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I already got warning from the committee that we are about to finish. Is there any more question? Okay. Do we have time for one more question? Okay. One last question, and later, for those who still have question, you can ask directly to Yaqubi or Pak Rifki after the session. Yes.
Terima
Please
kasih, Mbak.
introduce
Hi,
yourself.
my name is Valencia.
Yeah.
I'm from Jakarta. So my question to Mohanad is, maybe you can tell more about the effort of archiving the stories of Palestinians. Especially, I'm really taken aback with your comments about making memories. Because I'm just wondering, with all these archives that you have, what kind of future of what kind of Palestine that you can share with children or the generations who are growing, inside of conflict eras, because they do not have any other picture of Palestine. Thank you.
I think that in Off-Frame and in R21, the most important element in the film is the credits. It's after we watch, it's okay, nice, but the credits have an inventory of every film, the director, producer, year of production. And this, at least you are reducing 50% of the research for anyone who comes after that. Once you search for these names, these titles, you will find information. And this is the information for the next generation. It's using the film format as an inventory, as an archive itself. Palestinians, they don't have sovereignty. They can't build structures, beautiful structures like these, and to put their archives in. But we can make films. And the films itself is a structure that we insert our stories inside until there is the sovereignty and there is the structure we can put it in. There are many, many, many efforts of archiving in Palestine on Palestinian memory, and it really goes, again, as the same thing everywhere, and it's different formats. So there are archives in Chile, for example, for the Palestinian community, because Chile has the largest Palestinian community in South America, and it started from the 30s and 40s, 60s until today. And they have their own archives. They archive their stories, they archive their dialect. Also, because some Palestinian who traveled, moved there before 48 and lived there, and they taught their kids Arabic. But it's the dialect, like that, when they left, they kept the same dialect. So the dialect itself becomes the archive of a certain period. So when I go there I went to Chile and I speak with the people, it's like, wow, it's Arabic, it's Palestinian, but it's a different dialect. I never heard it from I asked from where, but I know this, you're from Hebron, but Hebron doesn't speak like that. And then I realized this is how Hebron used to speak 60 years ago. And the language itself becomes the archive. And they archive it and work on it and put it together. The same thing in music, in text. There are different universities that offer a syllabus about Palestine. There are also lots of media, like new media initiatives now for posters, for even films, and it's there. We are there, and we are gonna stay there.
Okay. For those who still have questions, maybe we can continue later after the session, since we are approaching Maghrib. Yeah. So thank you very much, Yaqubi, Pak Rifki, for the discussion. I will pray to people in Palestine and to your family as well. Yeah. hopefully this discussion is not only giving insight to all of us, but also sending our prayer to people in Palestine.
I really want to thank everyone here in Indonesia who I encountered. Everybody was showing support. I was thinking if I was in Europe, I will never see this support. It made my days here much more easier. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much. I'll return the stage to the committee. Selamat sore. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.